Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and these are my thoughts on 2001 A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, another episode of Science Fiction for the Somewhat Hesitant, my big old science fiction project to get me into some classic science fiction that I've up until recently found quite daunting. So today it's the turn of 2001 A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. And seeing as this part of the project, this phase of the project is called Great Books, Great Movies, I have also watched or rewatched the Kubrick film as well. So I will talk about that a little later on after I finished chatting about the book and what I thought about the book. There will be some mild spoilers in this video, nothing major, but there's a few plot points which I will touch upon that if you don't know the book or the film, you might, I'm giving some stuff away, but nothing major, nothing like the ending or anything like that. Yes, 2001 was written alongside the film with Kubrick, and 2001 I think was adapted sort of from a number of short stories by Clarke. So it's split into kind of four distinct parts really. It starts off with part one, millennia ago, when a strange monolith appears to a group of hominids, sort of early ape-like sort of, human precursors essentially. And this monolith kind of mysteriously influences them, kind of teaches them things somehow, and they learn to use tools to kind of kill for food or for territory, that kind of thing. Furthers their evolution essentially. Then in part two, we jump forwards millions of years to the year 1999, and we meet Dr. Floyd, who is kind of, I think, sort of a scientist's sort of advisor, who is on his way to the moon via a shuttle from Earth, where another monolith has been found, buried on the lunar surface, and the mystery of what it is and why it's been buried there deepens. Then in part three, we jump ahead a couple of years from that, to a crew on board a spacecraft on their way to Jupiter, and then I think onto Saturn. Several crew members are in hibernation, and the ship is kind of kept ticking over and run by two astronauts on a rotor, essentially, along with an AI computer, HAL 9000. HAL malfunctions. And the crew is kind of plunged into chaos. And then in part four, we follow one member of that crew, Dave Bowman, as he reaches his kind of destination around Saturn and finds another monolith, and then embarks on a rather surreal journey to who knows where and when. So that's your kind of basic rundown of the plot, etc. What did I think of it then? I loved this. I thought it was excellent. I got the same kind of warm, humorous writing style from Clarke that I really connected with when I read Childhood's End earlier in the year. I find Clarke's writing to be really accessible in that way. It sucks me in very easily. I really liked how Clarke used the structure of the book to explore themes of evolution and particularly humanity's place and purpose in the universe. The characters, although they're not particularly complex or layered, with the exception of Hal, the computer, they were all really relatable still, and they served their purpose very much. So they're all very they all have clear motivations, they all have a clear purpose there. As I say, their dialogue and things like that connects me to them. The opening parts, the one set like millennia ago, it's a really great opening. to the book, and it really establishes that mystery of the monolith and this theme of evolution. The way that it's written is really compelling, and I don't know, it has a weight to it that I really enjoy. And you do get inside the mind of the sort of I suppose protagonist within that section. You could call him the sort of the alpha male of the group. I think he is called Moonwatcher. The second part then furthers that mystery and establishes kind of how far humanity's come in terms of technology, from, you know, moving from sort of the simple blunt tools that we see in part one to this really advanced society capable of sort of, you know, commercial, I guess you'd call it, space travel, you know, easy space travel essentially. Things feel really recognisable. I really liked that about it. The shuttles and, you know, and the spaceports, you know, and you know, sort of moon base, things like that. They all have a real flavour of like airline travel, like modern airline travel. And I say, yeah, not necessarily contemporary as in today, but certainly modern, you know, within sort of the 60s, 70s. They're recognisable as airline travel. And the way that Clarke writes about these elements was really amusing. From the kind of the ability to access all newspapers, which is, you know, it's mentioned even that it's, you know, that's kind of an outdated term really, but newspapers on a handheld digital device, to the anti-gravity toilet instructions. I did find that particularly amusing. Also to the feeling of like constantly being served food by the hostesses aboard the sort of the relatively short haul flights to the moon. So yeah, all of that was I found, you know, really engaging and amusing, and it kind of connected me to it really easily. It's in this second part that the science starts to kind of come into the story more. There is more kind of scientific discussion, scientific language, etc. But I didn't ever feel overwhelmed by it, nor did it really ever feel dry to me. The characters, whilst not like super complex or anything, they were, as I say, they were warm enough that actually when these scientific sort of sections, you know, scientific information was being discussed, I was still connected to it. The third part with Hal, the computer, was by far my favourite. I really, really enjoyed this. The tension and the pacing here felt really well done. And Hal is probably, I think, the most developed character in the book, funnily enough. The motivations that it has for its actions, which let's just say are way outside acceptable parameters, those are fascinating. Those motivations, the sort of discussions that come up around that, the ideas that Clarke discusses and questions he asks of the reader regarding AI, or he asks you to, you know, to kind of ponder regarding AI and sentience, definitely gave me plenty to think about there. The fourth part, I think, is the most tricky with regards to comprehension, as it kind of falls headfirst into some more sort of surreal concepts. It's definitely conceptual stuff at that point. But for me, this is where Clarke's writing kind of really shines, not just in his ability to convey the visual elements of this very weird kind of environment that Bowman's journeying through and ends up in, and Bowman's sort of eventual evolution, I guess you could say, by the end of the book. But it's how Clarke eased me into that kind of, that way of thinking and just the comprehension of it. Clarke's gentle kind of ramping up of the science from the previous parts, across the whole book really. The humour, the humanity of his writing meant that by the time I got to this kind of much more difficult stuff, this much more mind-melty stuff, I was fully kind of ready and able to engage with it. And that is something that I would say again that's similarly so in Childhood's End. That's what I found in that is, by the time you got to the stuff at the end of the book, which was asking some really quite big, difficult questions to think about, fascinating, but mind melty stuff, I was totally ready for it, because Clarke just kind of somewhat stealthily, I think, eases you into that with his warmth and his what's with his characters, the ease and accessibility of his writing style, things like that. That's one thing I really have loved about both books that I've read about Clarke. So that's generally what I've loved about it. There wasn't really anything I didn't like about it, to be honest. Nothing I thought that was wrong with it anyway. So I will pop the rating up on screen. So for character then, I've given a 7. It's not complex layered characters, as I say, but they are relatable and interesting nonetheless. They are very much vehicles for the ideas and for moving the plot ahead, but they are still very, I could still connect to them, and I still wanted to know about them, and I'd want to know more about them, do you know what I mean? But it's not what the book is about, but I think Clarke does a good job with the character work nonetheless. Atmosphere then, I've given this an 8. Each part very much had its own sort of atmosphere, as well as kind of a common sort of feeling atmosphere tied together with the sense of kind of eerie mystery of the monoliths. I could imagine the settings and environments extremely easily. I certainly had a very clear picture in my head, even with the more strange sort of surreal conceptual elements of the final part as well. Okay, writing, I've given a 9 to. I really like Clarke's style. I find it really, really engaging, really accessible. He can be poetic at times. There's a certain, I think the word that comes to mind really is that there's a gravitas to it. But it can also be very straightforward as well when required. And the scientific discussion, the use of scientific language and things like that is both, interesting and manageable in terms of comprehension. I don't ever feel overwhelmed by the ideas because of the way that Clarke writes them. Plot, I've given it an 8. I really enjoyed the story arc in this. It feels it's a little strange at times, but I really liked it. I didn't really ever feel that the pacing was ever a problem. There weren't any bits that I lost interest in or anything like that. I was it was compelling throughout for me. There was highs and lows, and certainly in part 3, that's where you get some of the real standout kind of highs and tension and stuff like that. But yeah, it kept me going all the way through without a problem. The ending is somewhat open-ended, but I think in this it only serves to kind of leave you with an inquisitive pondering, rather than any kind of sense of being shortchanged. It doesn't feel unfinished in that kind of open-ended, what the hell kind of way. But it's just Clarke is asking you to ask questions, to think about things. Ideas, I've given a 9. This book is teeming with ideas. That's one of its biggest pluses for me. It didn't leave me musing over questions quite as much as Childhood's End did, at least not in the way that stayed with me for so much and so kind of so emphatically, but it was provocative nonetheless. There are a ton of ideas in this. Enjoyment, I've given this a 9. I really, really enjoyed the reading, or a listening experience this was, and I have to say the narrator on this absolutely got the tone right for me, got the characters right. It was really well read. It was compelling all the way through it, and I was saying the mystery and the intrigue of where it was going kept me engaged the whole way through. Really, really enjoyed it. So if we add up those scores and divide by 6, we get an 8.33 out of 10. I will round that up to an 8.5 out of 10. And this gets a rating on Storygraph will be 4.5 stars. So yeah, excellent, really, really excellent book. Thoroughly enjoyed it. So then, I've read the book, time to rewatch the film. I had previously watched 2001: A Space Odyssey back in the early 2000s. I'd watched it a few times in quick succession because it was part of my studies when I was doing my drama degree. And we watched this along with several other Kubrick films. And I'd not liked it at all back then. I really didn't like it. So has that changed now I've rewatched it after reading the book? Unfortunately not. I can see why it's a classic and a favourite for a lot of people, but it's just really not for me, which is kind of strange considering I really like the book. I think this is a Kubrick thing for me rather than anything else. I'm not really a fan of his stuff. Other than A Clockwork Orange, which I really like, I've not been a fan. So yeah, I think it's a Kubrick thing more than anything else. I can admit, however, that the cinematography in 2001 is brilliant. There are some amazing visuals in it, and in terms of, you know, some of the wide, expansive shots, and you know, just kind of the choice of shots and the edit. And I did enjoy elements of the production design as well. The score's very effective. It's quite emotionally effective. But even though I really liked the opening in the book, I really don't enjoy the opening in the film. I know it's a really famous one, but yeah, I just don't like it. It just doesn't do anything for me. For me, I think it's like, I find a lot of the warmth of Clarke's writing, the stuff that engages me, the stuff that keeps me going with it, is kind of lost in translation within the film. And the characters, even though, as I say, they're not hugely developed in the book, the characters in the film are kind of shadows of their literary counterparts. I do prefer the expansion of Hal's character that you get in the book versus the more kind of mysterious rendition in the film of why Hal acts as it does. But that section in the film with Hal on that spaceship, that's definitely the best for me. That's the best part of the film. I did enjoy that section, I have to say. But like the book, like when I was reading the book, it whizzed by when I was listening to it. It felt like such a quick read. Whereas the film felt like super long, and I know it's long anyway, it's nearly 3 hours long, but I have to say it dragged quite a lot for me. So yeah, as I say, it's like, I think it comes down to the fact that I'm a fan of Clarke, but I'm not a fan of Kubrick. So I think that's probably just where the difference lies in this one. And you can't win them all. As I say, I can totally see the quality objectively in Kubrick's film. It's just, for me as a viewer, it just doesn't, for me, it's just not it's not my kind of thing. That's basically it. So there we go. That is, those are my thoughts on 2001: A Space Odyssey, both the book and the film. So yes, Clarke, I will be continuing on with Clarke, without a doubt. I definitely want to get to some more of his standalones. I want to read some of his short stories. But obviously there are sequels to 2001: A Space Odyssey. There are 3 sequels, I believe, to 2001: A Space Odyssey. So a question for you, gentle viewers. If you have read any of the sequels to 2001, so what's that, 2010, 2061 and 3001, I think. If you've read those sequels, do let me know if you think they're worth reading, if it's worth reading on in this series. Likewise, if you have any other favourite Clarke books, do let me know that too. I do own Rendezvous with Rama and The City in the Stars, so those two that I have in stock, so to speak. So yeah, do let me know in the comments below what you think I should read next of Clarke's. So that'll do from me today. Thank you very much for watching, folks. As always, as I say, do leave your thoughts in the comments below. Next up on Sunday will be my weekly vlog, the first of my weekly vlogs, so we'll see how that goes. Still getting into the swing of vlogging things. And then in terms of science fiction stuff, for June, I also read Solaris, so I will have a review out for that probably next week, I think. So I do hope you will join me for those videos when they drop. But yes, from me, for now, that's ta-ra.